Alright, in this tutorial you will create a sweet door animation triggered by the player using Unity and C#. In this scene I've got a couple doors set up with some ground floor. That's really all you need. You can download the free dungeon pack. First thing is, looking at these two doors, we need to identify where the pivot is. Now to do that, we want to go up to our scene view here and make sure that we have our pivot here set for the pivot and not center. We need to look at which way these doors are going to swing. So this one has the pivot here where I can open the door no problem. This one, however, the pivot is in the middle. That would kind of be a problem, but you have two ways of fixing this. One is you could open this in a 3D program like Blender and change the pivot point. Or two, we could actually create a pivot for it by right-clicking, create empty, and this would be our door pivot. And we can put it on our door as a child and reset the transform so it'll place it right here. And then we can pull it out so it's in that same spot. But now we can move it to the edge of the door. Now, this is just an empty object, and we're going to take our door bad pivot and drag that in there, bleep, as a child object. So now this door pivot, now it's the same as this one, and I could animate it accordingly. Okay, so that's how you would do that. I'm gonna call this one maybe door 2 pivot so I'm not confused. Put that to the side. But ideally you would want your pivot set up in the spot that you want it to rotate. So next up, once we animate the door, whether it's moving or rotating, because we could even have this as a door that slides in or slides out, you know, depending on if you have a specific theme or sci-fi door. So what we want to do, we're actually going to create a parent. We could just go ahead and right click on it, create an empty, call this door 1 parent. I'm going to drag it down now, and this will become the parent where the pivot is already where I want it. And then we'll take this door object and put it inside there. Now our door parent, this is where we would save a prefab, and we can move this around our scene wherever we want to, and it won't mess up our animations. But I'm going to leave it right where it's at. We could zero these out if we wanted to, right, to put our object at the center of the world and go from there. But anywhere in your scene is fine because we're not animating the parent. Now, we do want for our area to have a trigger that when the player walks up, we'll be able to call on trigger enter and have it open the door. So we're going to go ahead and add a box collider. And I'll just go ahead and set this to a 2 by 2 by 2 here. And we'll just click edit so we can see where that's at. Looks like maybe a 1 on the Y. And then really all I need to do is just kind of drag these corners here and kind of set it. How big of an area do I want to open the door? So maybe a little bit wider, and bring it forward so the player walks into it, it'll open. I also want it the same for the other side, so I'm going to bring that forward as well. So that way this area, we can have it open as well. That's pretty good. Next up, on our door parent, we also will have some audio. So we'll go ahead and add an audio source. This is our speaker that will play the audio file. And in fact, we could even set it to have a spatial blend for 3D. So say if we were running away really fast, the sound would get quieter. So if we set it to 3D, you can kind of play with this setting and test it with the audio to see how you like it. Now, to start animating our door. So to have it have this really cool swinging out, we need to create an animation. We select our door 1 object. We'll go to the animation window. You can get that up from the window main menu and go to animation and then the animation window. With the object selected, you'll see that we can go ahead and create an animator and a clip. So this kind of shortcuts the process to kind of create several steps for us. So we'll go ahead and create, and then it'll ask us to save this. And so I'll go into my anim folder. And since I already have several folders here, you can, if you don't have an anim folder, go ahead and create an anim folder. You can just simply right click in here, new folder, and create it. And I'm also going to create for my door 1. And I'm just going to put everything in here so that I have it all packed together. Now this first animation clip, I'm going to call this door closed idle, because the door will be closed like it's idling. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this in here. And when we do that, it creates our door idle animation. And on our object, it goes ahead and adds this animator in here as well, which will have our different animations. Now this animator controller currently, we can click on it, is kind of set up like so. This is our default animation right here, door closed idle. And you can see it's listed here. It's in orange, and that'll be our default state. Go back to my scene view. Select our door, and for our door closed idle, and actually set this to maybe 12 frames. We don't need it super smooth because the door is going to be opening pretty quickly. So we'll do add property now, transform, and then rotation. Now, when we do it this way, it automatically creates a keyframe at the end, and then in 12 frames, it'll be 1 second, and we get this other keyframe. So that's nice. We got it. All right, let's go to our project window, and you'll see where it saved our stuff. We have the state, the animation clip, which is like a video clip. And then we have our animator here. I'm going to rename this and call it door 1 animator, because it is our animator controller. Because if we double click that, it brings up that same window. Now, we're going to take our door closed idle here, and we're going to duplicate it. So Control D to duplicate that. And then we'll click in here, and we'll call this one door opening. And what we can do is drag this into here. And now we have our state for that. And this state over on inspector has the animation clip linked here. Now we'll come back to this in a second, but we're going to go to our animation window here and change our door closed to door opening. We'll go to our scene view so you can see it as well. And what we're going to do is we want, if it's opening, the first frame it's closed, but we're going to go to the last frame and we want to rotate it. So we're simply going to click record, and then I can do rotate, maybe something like that. It's a little bit more open than 90 degrees. So we can kind of round this off up here to -95. So it's just a little bit more open. Now, depending on your door, you could open it more. It's up to you. But I think this looks nice for this door right at the moment. And then we want to go ahead and turn off record. And when we play, it's going to loop it automatically. And that's a little slow. I think we'll probably make this, we can just click our keyframe here, click and drag it to the 5 frame mark. Yeah, well, that's nice. So when we come into the trigger area, we want it to open pretty quickly. Whoosh. There we go. I like that. I like that. So this is good. We've got it saved already. We're going to go back to our project and our door opening now. We're going to duplicate this, Control D, and we'll call it the opposite, door closing. And we can go to our animator and drag that in as well. So we have all our states in here for our door. Now, currently, the only one it's using is the idle, which is fine. We'll get to that. But let's finish setting up our animations. So we go back to our animation window, and we were in door opening. Let's switch to door closing. Go to our scene. So because we duplicated, right, it's actually opening. So all we want to do is reverse these keyframes. And we don't want to drag them on top of each other, but what I can do is drag this to keyframe 1 and then drag 0 to the very end. And then drag this one back to 0 here. So now that way, our first keyframe is 0, -95, 0. You could also click record and just redo it. And then at the 5 frame mark, put the rotation to 0, 0, 0. But either way that works, now we have it's going from open and it's closing, like so. There you go. Love it. So now, the last thing we want to do with our clips here is set them up. So the door idle. Now you could have a variety of models or things. Maybe there's something on the door moving, or we have a light blinking, right? But either way, the door idle would be looping because that most idles are going to loop. Now, the closing animation is not going to loop. We want it to play closing the door one time and stop. And then door opening, we also don't want it to loop. We want it to open one time and stay open before closing. So that's how we set up those. The only one that is looping is the door closed idle. So now we'll go to our animator here, and we have the idle. We want it to be opening and then closing and then back to idling. And we could do this with 4 states as well, but there's an easy way to do this where we only have to do 3, little less work, and it still works just as good. And I'm sure we could find other ways to make this happen. And we're going to use the state machine, and we're going to create some transitions between each of these. So what we want to do, we're going to right click on our door idle and do make transition, and then drag and click this to door opening. And then on door opening, we're going to right click, make transition, and then put this to door closing. And then on door closing, we want to right click, make transition, and drag that to door closed idle. So now we get this kind of loop, but it's not going to loop around automatically, right? But we have this circuit of the door's idling, then we tell it to open, then we tell it to close, and then we tell it to go back to idling. Now to do this, before we write any code, there's a few more quick settings we need to go. So in our animator, we have layers and we have parameters. If we go to our parameters window, so we're going to click the plus, and we have 4 types of parameters we could use. Now the easiest of them that I think personally to start with is the trigger. This is a trigger parameter for the animator that we can call. So we can call set trigger or even reset trigger. So we're going to create a trigger, and this is going to be open. We're also going to need one for close. So we'll do another trigger, and we'll call this one close. And these we can be able to even test by clicking them, and you'll see this means it's triggered close, and then we can trigger open. So it's pretty cool. See those in action. So our default state is idle. We want it to go from idle to opening only if we set the trigger to open. So we're going to click the transition arrow, and we're going to come over to the conditions for this. So in order to transition from idle to open, we can click this plus symbol and say we want open to be set. So if we trigger open, it'll play the animation. Now there is this checkbox here for has exit time. Now this would make the transition happen at a specific time in the settings here. Now we don't want it to happen at a specific time. We want, when you trigger this, buddy, we want you happening right now. Right? So we got to turn that off. No exit time. This is you meet the condition, you go into the animation. Oh yeah. So we're going to do the same thing now for door opening. We want to click the transition and say, hey, you're going from open to close. So the condition would be, hey, if we tell it to set trigger close and no exit time. So imagine now if it transitions to door closing, it plays the animation and it stops. Okay, well now it plays the animation. We want it to go ahead and go back to the default idle state. So that way it'll be waiting for it to be triggered again to open. So we're going to click this transition. And for this one, no condition. We just want it to have an exit time. We want it to automatically go from the close animation to just back to the idle state. Now in our settings, our exit time, we'll probably set this to maybe 0.5, so a half a second. We think that's pretty good. And there we go. Now we can test this, but we'll have to put this in a separate window, so we can bring this over to another window. So now what we can do is if we click play, our door will go back to the idle state. And you'll see this nice blinking blue line here. And if I click open, I manually just set the trigger and it plays the open animation and stays there. Remember, because there's no exit time. Now, if I want it to close, I got to do the set trigger, close. And then you see it goes back to the idle and it's ready to go again. I can do open and then close, and then it goes back to idle. So now that's manually testing it so that we know that it's set up correctly. And now that we've tested it, we want to actually set up a script to activate the animations. So we'll turn off play, go back to our scene view. On our door, let's see, on our door parent here, because our door parent has the box collider, and this needs to be set to is trigger. So this box collider is our trigger area, and we have our audio source. We're going to add and do a new script. And so another way to add a script through here, we can say door controller, do create and add. I went ahead and moved my script in here for the moment. Double click that to open it up. Now for our script starting out, we're going to need some variables. We need to know what door are we getting to animate. We need the audio clip and the audio source as well. And we'll also have to get the animator off of the door. We can go ahead and remove these and add in those variables real quick. So here, we need to assign our game object the door and assign what the door squeak sound will be here in a second. And then we'll be getting these in our start to cache and get those, the animator and the audio source, so we'll be ready to use those. So we'll add our start function, and then for our anim, there's a couple ways that we could do this. There is a get component in children that you can use, and in this case, right, the door is the child object, so we could use that. But also, if we wanted for some reason to set the trigger object a separate, where the child, the door was not the child, then what we'd want to do is just make sure that, hey, whatever the door is, let's see, oh, I capitalize it. Whatever the door is, we'll just say door dot get component and get the animator. And then we'll add in for our source. In this case, the audio source is on the object that the script is on. So we can just say get component and it will get that audio source off of that. Otherwise, this is getting the animator off of the door game object that we haven't assigned yet. So that's not even going to get it. So let's go ahead and assign that. So we save this and go back into Unity. So if we select our parent, you'll see we have our two open slots. And we'll go ahead and drag in door one object. That's the door that we'll be getting the animator off of. Now we're also going to need some audio files here. And we'll be using this Shapeforms rotate stone. I'll put a link in the description below where you can download those. Reselect my parent. And if need be, we can lock this just for the moment, just so we don't accidentally click off. And I can drag in that audio clip. And then I want to turn off lock. That way I can select other things and it changes. So make sure you don't leave it locked. So now I've got those assigned. We'll open back up our script again. And we'll add an on trigger enter. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is just do a quick check just to make sure we didn't forget or write something incorrect. But we could check to make sure, hey, if the animator is null, that means for some reason we're not getting it, or we forgot to assign the door. We could print a message or debug.log. Animator has not been assigned. right? Just a little helpful note. So we could do else if the other dot game object dot compare tag. We want to see if that is the player. So we also need to make sure we have a tag for the player and that the player is tagged. So we don't want to forget that. And we could also just say like, hey, we don't want to run this either if the animator's empty. So we're going to say if the anim is not equal to null. So it will have to meet both these conditions. The other object that enters the trigger of the door has to be tagged player, and the animator cannot be nothing. And this would be how we write the code where we go to the animator and we set the trigger to open, which will then open the door. Next, we want to play the audio clip that the door is opening. So we can grab our audio source, which we capitalized on all of these on accident. And you can right-click, rename, or you can also do Control-RR if you're on a PC. And we can move our cursor with the arrow keys and backspace or delete that and put a regular lowercase as it should be. And then it'll give us a preview and we just click apply and we're good to go. We'll do source dot play one shot. And then all we have to do is call what is the audio clip that we're playing. So in this case, it is the door squeak sound. Bam. So now we got that set up. So now for the on trigger exit. Awesome. So now we have on trigger exit. If the player exits, it will play the close animation and the sound for the door squeaking as it's moving. And we could play test that. Oh, I love it. Now, in some cases, we may want to add some kind of whack sound when the door opens all the way, because that can come in handy. So why not do a little bit of extra fun and show you another trick? So for that, what we're going to do is our door object, we're going to create an event to play an audio. And we need a script first. So I'm going to come into my folder here where the door controller is. And I'll go ahead and create a C# script here. And we'll call this door shut audio. Open that up. So we'll have our audio source. And we're going to assign this from the parent. And then we need the audio clip for the door shut sound. We also want to add a clip for when the door is all the way open. So we're going to have the door kind of creaking, going, and then we went, shh. Either way, we may want to have two different sounds, one for when the door is all the way open and one for when the door is all the way shut. You'll see that here in a second. On a visual example will make more sense. So we could use the same sound for both or change this up, but just to kind of give you an idea of where some customization. So now let's go ahead and add a method for those. And our first method here that we'll call from the animation window. So when the door has opened all the way open. Maybe at the end we want a click sound or a swoosh sound. We'll put that here. And you could name this a variety of things depending on what your door's doing and what sound you want it to make. Then we'll also add in our method for the shut door audio. So this is when the door is actually slamming shut. What sound does that make? We could rename this even. We could do Control RR and maybe call it door whack sound. Click apply. There we go. Awesome. Now let's save this and go back to Unity. So we'll select our door1 object. And here we need to assign those variables. So when they're called, they run without any issue. And so our source here, this is just going to be the audio source that's on the parent. So we could drag the parent in there and it'll get the audio source off of it. Or we could click the dot, go to scene, and then do door1 parent. Bam. And then for the whack sound and the swoosh sound, so I kind of was in between with it opening, doing a swoosh or doing just a light sound of it stopping. So I think you could test it and see it out. We'll try it first with this kind of doot sound. That's for when the door has opened and stopped. And for when the door shuts and whacks the frame, we'll do this kind of punchy sound from shape forms. So now that we got those assigned, we can go to our animation, select our door object, and change this to the door closing. And we'll go to frame 5 here, and we're going to add, so you want to just scrub the timeline to bring the slider. So the door has just shut right on frame 5. We'll click this add event, right? This is add animation event. And then now, this function or method, we can get it off of our object. So the script door shut audio, the method play door shut sound or door audio. We could rename these, but nonetheless, there it is. Play the audio for shutting that closing sound. So when the door shuts, it'll go whack. It'll go whack. So we'll change this to the door opening as well. And same thing, we'll scrub the door has opened. And so this animation event that I had here already, I can go in here, just make sure that's updated to the play the swoosh or the whoosh, or I could change it to dud, but something, but it's there. So now it'll play that sound as well. So now that we've got those all set up, we'll go back to our project window. In our prefabs window, what we want to do is take our door1 parent object, and you could rename this if we want to maybe just call it door1, and this is the door1 object or door1 artwork, whatever makes sense to you. But our parent now is what is ready to go. Now the question is, do I want to also include the door frame to create a prefab as well? That depends. That's up to you. Maybe you have multiple door frames. I don't know. But for right now, what we'll do is just the door. And so I'll drag my door1 parent into prefabs. And now I have a prefab ready to go because it has the parent object, which has our squeaking sound whenever it opens and closes. It's connected to the trigger here for when the player enters and exits, and then our door object that actually animates and has the sound being called for whenever it whacks shut or it's, whacking open. Either way, we got it there, and we have a prefab ready to go. Please like and subscribe. I hope this video helped you, and I hope to see you again in the next video.